everybody. So we are back with a Little Miss Funeral and myself, Kari, and we are going to do our next set of 10 questions, and we'll see if we get this into one video or two this time. Last time we got rambling and going on our answers. So I'm going to just jump right in, and we honestly have not prepared these questions at all. I just looked at them quickly before the video, and Lauren has not seen any of these questions.
Yeah, I haven't looked at these at all, so.
It keeps us a little more on our toes, and maybe we will be on anti-points on one of these for once instead of
maybe this is what we needed. Maybe we needed to be like so ill-prepared when it came to answering these things.
Be a battle. So, well, the first question, how do you both feel about Caitlyn with her view of how the funeral business should be? And I get a lot of Caitlyn questions, and I always wonder, does anybody ask Caitlyn about Kari? Which she'll be like, who's Kari, I feel like. But, and I only talk about Caitlyn when people ask me about Caitlyn. It's, I don't feel like we're on opposite sides of the coin, but people seem to put us against each other. Like somebody said, hey, if Kari and Caitlyn were in a fight, who would win? And I'm like, what is this, like Fight Club? Woo, there you went.
My dog literally just hit my camera, so hold on one second. We're experiencing technical difficulties. No. Okay, go on.
So, well, you go ahead and go first. How do you feel about Caitlyn's view on the funeral business?
Okay. Well, I actually did a talk with Caitlyn. Like,
oh, that's right.
You do. God, that had to have been maybe like 3 years ago or something by this point. So, I mean, I don't even know if she knows who I am either, but I did do this talk with her. And during the talk, like, we kind of had some time, like, before we were recording and just talking, and she was like super nice, you know, like she really was with everything. I love what she does with the whole getting people to talk about death and dying, and different things like that. But I think that sometimes, and honestly, I feel like I'm gonna get a lot of hate within the community for saying this, but I feel like sometimes she takes it to an extreme.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like sometimes she can bash the funeral profession a little too much. And don't get me wrong, like there's a lot wrong within the funeral industry. But the thing is, I feel like pointing out flaws never fixes anything. I feel like, you know, if we talk about the the positives for everything, and I feel like if we focus on what we're doing right and ways that we can grow, we can help the profession more that way than kind of being like, well, this is wrong, this is broken, we need to fix this kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I think that it's great that she's vocalizing an option for people for home funerals and taking care of your own dead, because I think that, once again, as funeral professionals, it's our part to do what we can do to give families options, and not every funeral is going to be right for everybody, so it's nice if you can offer a traditional setting versus a home setting and then let each family choose. But I just sometimes wish that she would do it in a little bit more of a positive light as a whole when it comes to the funeral profession. She's doing a great job getting people to talk about it. I know she has a huge following, and she does a great job educating people, but I am one person personally where I just like positive feedback. I like just looking at the good in things rather than looking at what's broken.
Right. No, agreed. Like I envy her knowledge on the history of the death care industry that she has, because that's what she studied in school, and I don't have as much of that at all, because that's what she studied so in-depthly, and I love that. So I love learning when, you know, she's posting things about that area. But she's not an embalmer. Last I knew and last I had checked, she was not licensed as an embalmer. So, you know, when I am talking about embalming, that's what I do. And, you know, people will say, well, why don't you watch Caitlyn's video on this? I'm like, well, she's not an embalmer. I'm not going to go watch Bob Smith, who's a mechanic, talk about embalming. If that's not your vocation, then I'm not going to go to you for that. But I am going to listen to her on the death care history and all that. And I do love learning about how in her area, and they do now this video, I feel like I can't talk.
Don't worry, I'll be the same way in a couple questions.
She does the home funerals all the time and knows how much ice do you need to get? What do you need to do for this? What they sell the kit for you to have your home, preparedness ready for doing the home funeral and everything. And I would be like, oh, what do I need to get? It's not something I do even once a year in this area. It's just not common. So I would be like, okay, what does Caitlyn do? I would totally rely on looking to her for that information, because she's kind of that famous figure for that type of a service. But, when it comes to death positive, which is the kind of term that's been coined around what's going on within the industry now, and that she's very much leading the discussion on that, I feel like being death positive is just talking about death and talking about the industry in any way. And so I think that you and I are also, we're all three of us are doing that in a great way, and being females doing that is so awesome. I think it opens a lot of people's eyes on what a funeral director can and does look like nowadays, and what options are out there in the big scheme. And I think just because we embalm and it's one of our things in our toolbox, it doesn't mean that we are pro embalming and this is what you have to do, and like we force it on anybody or we tell them that they have to do it, where she is kind of like, don't do it, don't go down that road, and I was trying to think of great examples earlier. I'm like, just because a Democrat's a Democrat doesn't mean they're anti-Republican. Just because I embalm doesn't mean I'm anti not embalming kind of thing. It's, you can.
I feel like within the funeral industry, like if you go into funeral services, there are so many different like avenues that you can take within this industry, and I feel like for her, she is going that route of the home funeral, take care of your own dead, and she has so much knowledge when it comes to that, and that's awesome.
Right.
But then for people who are looking for like embalming and that kind of knowledge, it's like you're a wonderful resource for that, because like that's what you do day in and day out. And then like for me, it's like I do a ton of like family work and like organizational aspects and funerals and things. I mean, not saying that like all three of us don't do that, but I feel like we each kind of have our own little lane that we're in, which there's no like right or wrong way when it comes to doing it. It's just like everybody has options, and it's great to be able to have resources, but because like we're all so different at the same time, you can't compare like one person to the other, because we're all just trying to do what we can do to help families. We're trying to do what we can do to put our personal knowledge out there, and if everybody just does it in the best way possible, then I think we'll be able to really get that death positive movement going, because you'll be able to reach everybody from like any walks of life, because you'll be able to identify with some person.
Right. What is the weirdest outfit you have seen a corpse wear?
God, I really haven't had anything super weird. The weirdest thing to me that had happened was one time I had somebody pass away, and the family gave us an outfit to dress them in, which I think the person was, I'm trying to remember, because it was like when I first got licensed, I think that they were like a military member, and it was like their like military outfit that we had them laid out in. And before the final disposition, they were going to be cremated. The family asked us to like have them be cremated naked. So like it's not that they wore anything weird, but it was the fact that like the family then wanted them to just like
be naked,
be cremated in nothing then. So that was probably like the weirdest thing for me. But besides for that, like I get a lot of suits, I get a lot of like dresses, jerseys I get, but like nothing ever completely out there.
yeah.
Not yet, at least.
I'm having new ones pop in my mind as you're talking. I had a lady ask for her boyfriend to be very naked because that's how she liked him. And we said no. You put something on for viewing. I've had somebody where they wanted the person in their like strapless wedding dress, and they had an autopsy and they'd been in a car accident and stuff. So
it's like, always like that, isn't it?
We need a little more coverage. So we ended up, she was also a military, and we put her in her uniform instead. But you know, changing people, I think, or I've had like 85-year-old lady in a thong, you know, and you're like in there going, really, like you want me to? Okay, I'm gonna do it.
I had an old woman in like this like little, she wasn't being viewed, she was just gonna be like a direct burial, and her family gave us like this little like nightie, which I was like,
go grandma.
I was like, it doesn't, not what I pictured her in. I forgot about her until you just said that.
If someone commits suicide and it doesn't look suspicious, are they still required to do an autopsy?
I've never had a suicide person who like didn't have an autopsy. You know,
I get it a lot.
Even, I mean, and an autopsy can be like the invasive autopsy that you're thinking of. Sometimes it's just like some blood work that's done, but I have never had a person who like every single person who's ever committed, am I wording this correctly? Forgive me if I'm not. Every single person that I have taken care of that committed suicide has gone to the medical examiner before they've come to the funeral home.
And so either they've had an external where they just look over their body, take blood for toxicology, or they do a single post where they may just open the thoracic or just open the cranium, or a double post is where they open the cranium and the thoracic. And they always take the blood to do toxicology. It's kind of
because a lot of the times it can be very obvious, you know, like this person, they died by hanging, you know, so like they obviously know the cause of death, but a lot of times they'll do, you know, the toxicology to see if they had any drugs or anything like that in their system.
First. If one wants to do a non-embalmed viewing, how does that process go, and do they have a smaller time period in which they can do a viewing?
Okay, so I believe that this, well, I don't know for certain. Like, for instance, in New York State, there's no law that says you need to be embalmed. Like, no law whatsoever. And most funeral homes, however, will have a policy in place saying, like, even though it's not a New York State law, it's our funeral home policy if you want to have a viewing to have an embalming. And they just, there's so many different reasons for why people do that. It's a body by body situation. So like if somebody passes away, I mean, one body can start, you know, showing signs of decomposition like within an hour or so, and then you might get somebody who's been deceased for a couple of days and they look phenomenal in the sense of like, I can't believe that they have been dead this long. So it's a really hard question to answer just because it's body by body situation. It depends on the environment in which they've died. But I have shown bodies in private settings at the funeral home where they've been unembalmed, and, you know, I've done that the day after the passing, where we've just kept them, you know, in a cooler room, because the funeral home that I'm in doesn't have any sort of refrigeration unit, and they look fine. You know, there's nothing, they just look dead, you know, but there's like,
I think that in that first 24 hours, it's a lot of times they're just paler because that blood is settled out, and to me, that's like the main kind of change that I see, that paleness.
So, you know, it's something that can definitely be done. I mean, if it is your wishes that you want to view your loved one, but you don't want to have them embalmed, you find a funeral home that's going to work with you, because there will be ones out there that'll do that, but they might require it to be in more of a private setting just because people aren't used to seeing dead bodies as dead bodies. Yeah, you know, and it's not like they're going to hurt you or anything like that, but they're typically going to be doing it just to protect themselves. Like, for instance, I can give a really good example of this because this just happened, God, maybe a couple of months ago at the funeral home that I was working at. We had somebody pass away, and they were going to be a direct cremation, but the family wanted to come in, the immediate family wanted to come in and have like, not just like an idea of the person, but they wanted to have like a little family gathering. So I said, absolutely not a problem. So they came in, and I was talking to the widow on the phone, and it was like, it's not funny that, but it like, she was just so realistic about everything, because I was like, well, how would you like us to set them up? Do you want to bring me clothes, and like I can have them in the cremation container, I can put them on a stretcher, I can like do so many different things. And she goes, I just want them on the stretcher and just put a blanket over them. And I go, okay, because I really personally don't like having family members view their loved one on a stretcher if I can help it, just because I think it looks a little bit cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I don't know, it just looks a little too
feel
like,
them out. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, I would rather put them in some kind of like a container, a cremation container. It's just something with some blankets instead. And she just didn't want it. She goes, no, I just want them on the stretcher, and that's going to be fine. So about, I'd say like 15 people came into the funeral home then, and they stayed for maybe like an hour with this person. And a day later, I got such a nasty email from one of the family members. And they basically were saying, how could your funeral home show the person like this? It was not dignified. There was no respect. And they were going on and on and on. And within the email that they sent me, they basically they were talking as if it was a visitation, like the wording that they were using. It, like, I knew that they were picturing in their mind a traditional visitation. Right. So I responded to everything in the email. I was like, listen, this is what happened. This is what they wanted. You know, we were abiding by the family's wishes. And I got an email back the very next day saying, I'm so sorry. We were not aware of the situation. We had no idea that this was the widow's wishes. If we would have known that going into it, we wouldn't have ever thought that you guys did anything wrong. But it's true. It was just like, it was one of those settings where people aren't used to seeing people laid out in that kind of a sense, even though it wasn't your traditional viewing. You know, this person walked in thinking it was going to be. And I feel like with unembalmed bodies, you just have to make certain that everybody's just aware of the situation. They're not going to hurt you. They're going to be fine for an extended period of time if they're kept cooler and things like that. But
what happens when a church cemetery is abandoned? And this is one that I need to research, I think, some definitive answers on, because I know that I was told by a church pastor once, they had looked into putting in a cemetery, and I've talked about this, I think, but it was so expensive to get the insurance policy that they had to get, because if the church ever closed and the cemetery was abandoned, that policy would then kind of go to the state or wherever to care for that piece of property kind of indefinitely. I don't think that every church has that, but I'm guessing that maybe it's a state thing, that maybe our state has put something in place to try and help some of those situations, because there are so many of those type of things. And I get asked about some of these cemeteries where there's huge mausoleums, and you see pictures online now about, and it's just in shambles, and there's, you know, caskets sitting on ends and all over the place, that the things are falling apart, and there's nobody caring for it. There's nobody maintaining it. There's nobody trying to protect the sanctity of the bodies that are there. And I don't know what happens there. So I hate to say I don't know in some of those situations, but I really don't. I need to research that and do a video.
Yeah. I'm not certain what happens either, but I know, like, for instance, in the town that I am in, and in the town that my funeral home where I work is located, there are, we have a ton of cemeteries.
Yeah.
A ton of them. And some of them are very small. And I know that some of the smaller ones, which, like, I don't want to say were abandoned, because I'm not certain if these were church cemeteries or more private cemeteries or whatnot. But I know now, like, if there was ever to be a burial where we would have to do one in these cemeteries, we'd actually have to contact the town.
And we want to know, what has been your grossest body?
Oh God, I just had my grossest body.
Oh.
Literally just had my grossest body. I've had a couple of really bad I've had a lot of bad bodies. Probably the worst one, though. God, is this the worst one? Like, 3 of them come to mind, like, right off the bat. I had one that was so unbelievably burned that the only way to identify the person was by the dental records of them. That one was so horrible. But I would have to say that the worst one that I had was, the person was deceased for, I think they were thinking 3 weeks, either 2 or 3 weeks. They had no family. They were never married. They never had any children. The closest relative, I think, was like a second or third cousin that the medical examiner ended up finding. And they were completely, like, I don't even want to say it because I don't want, like, to gross people out, but, like, it is what it is kind of a thing. It was just like maggots upon maggots upon maggots. And I feel like that was one where, like, I didn't want to eat for a while after seeing that. Like, normally I see gross things, but I don't know how, like, I'm able to be like, oh, that's really gross, but I can get over it. Where this one with the maggots, I just, like, and I've seen body with maggots, but, like, this one was like, you couldn't see the facial features because it was just
so much.
That
Yay.
was, yeah.
Ugh.
I mean, I've had, like, ones that have been, like, you know, dead for a while, but that one was the worst.
I think those are the decomp bodies where they're days or weeks old. Just because of the smell factor and the ick factor, they win, I think, on the gross level. If you're going to talk about gross bodies, I feel like that's got to be that's probably my grossest too, he'd been dead at least a week in the middle of summer, no air conditioning. Luckily, every screen was closed in the house, so the flies didn't get in. So we didn't get the maggots, which was amazing. But I pulled up to the house with my part-time guy and the fire department. You know, everybody was there and their family was down the road. Everybody was, like, back away from the house. And all the windows and doors were, like, open and stuff. And I was like, this is not good.
No, like, when you pull up someplace and, like, nobody's inside and everybody's outside.
Yes.
When the police officers are outside and everybody's outside.
Well, and they're gowning up. They were all gowning up and putting on boots, like the boots up to their knees, and they were getting on gowns and stuff. I was like, okay. So I walked up. I was like, all right, show me what show me the situation. And I like taking those, people are so uncomfortable when you walk in. So I always kind of, like, do a little, okay, get in it game thing and kind of take control of the situation because they don't want to. And so I'm like, all right, let's go. Let's make a plan. And so we went in and they showed me where he was and they showed me his driver's license picture and I couldn't have identified him.
Yeah.
I tried. The family outside was like, do we need to identify him? I was like, visually, I don't think you can unless you know what he was wearing. And it was so soiled, you couldn't even tell.
Yeah.
It was horrible. It was so sad. It was horrible because the face swells and the eyes bulge out and you're like, are they going to pop? Like, you just don't know. And we went to move the gentleman and Well, the fire department guys are like, is he going to pop? Because the skin swells so much that it's so tight, and you're waiting, like, is it going to rip? Is it going to pop or burst? And I'm like, if it does, what else at this point are we going to do? So we luckily wrapped him and moved him and got him out, and he didn't, there was no major catastrophes. Of course, they ended up using another funeral home. But
after all of that was done.
Can someone with handicaps be a funeral director?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I am working with a young man, and he wants to be a funeral director, which I'm like, that's so funny that somebody asked that, because I'm in talks with this guy, and he's like, where would my hindrances be? He's in a wheelchair. He's doesn't have use of his legs, but he has use of his arms. And so he's like, where would I, need to alter anything, or what could I maybe not do? And so I like walked through everything, thinking like, what, where would the hindrances be? And I was lucky. I worked at a firm once that had a gentleman in a wheelchair as a part-time person, and him and I had gone through the whole building and had walked through everything we would ever do to see, okay, we need to just get a little pinch grabber for you to unlock this door, or it's hard for you to carry flowers because if you put them in your lap and you try and wheel them, some of the water may spill in your lap, and then you're wet for the rest of the day, for a couple hours. And so we're like, all right, that's not the best option. But there were so many things that I initially would have thought, oh, that might be hard. And because we don't live in that world, in terms of like, I don't function in that way every day, I don't know how to do things in that way. Like somebody who has only one arm knows how to put on a bra with only one arm, where I would be like, what the heck, I can't do that. It's just relearning life, I guess, and learning how to do things. Embalming was the only area when it came to, I guess, when I'm thinking handicap, to me, I'm going right to the wheelchair just because that's where I'm talking to the guy. But to me, that was the area that I was like, I don't know, that might have some challenges that I don't know how I would overcome them. I would have to maybe work with somebody in a wheelchair in the prep room and try and find answers to the problems we ran into, or the hiccups.
Like, with anything in life, like just as humans, like we all have our own limitations. They may just not be like these physical handicaps that other people are dealing with. And I think that it's knowing your body, knowing your limitations, and working around it. And then once again, kind of going back to what we were saying with Caitlyn, once again, there are so many different avenues that you can go down. It's like, you want to work in funeral service, you want to be a funeral director? Well, absolutely. But maybe you would be a better fit in this situation of funeral service, or maybe you'd be a better fit over here. And I feel like people who are handicapped, I mean, they're like, they know how their bodies work and don't work. And like you were saying, you and I maybe we can't think that way because we don't live that way. But for something that we would see as an obstacle, it's like they'd be able to overcome it, no problem, because it's just, they're normal. And, for me, it's like my mind maybe doesn't think that way because I've never had to deal with something like that. But, I think you just know your limitations, know what your strong points are, and you work how you can.
Well, one thing I've told him, his name's Tyler, a lot, is you need to get in and find a funeral home who is open to working with you, because they're going to love you as a person. And so it doesn't matter, anything that might be a little bit harder for you to do, they're going to try to help accommodate you, and try and help you find answers to get you on their staff. If you are the person they want, it's just like anything, if I, when I was pregnant, the place I worked was like, what can we do to make this better? Do we need to, send you along with 2 removal people. Well, obviously, yeah, because I couldn't lift. But, it was like all these different things that, your employer, as long as they like you as a person and what you do for families, they're going to work around you in any other capacity and help you be part of the team. The only thing I do think of, like, some of these funeral homes, because I've worked in funeral homes where their arrangement room is in the basement.
Yeah.
And because it's an old house and there's no way, it's not handicap accessible.
And with the ADA, what was that, 1991, the ADA?
Yeah, and I don't know what year, but yeah, there's a lot of it grandfathered in where
1991. Yeah, so you go to some funeral. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Technical difficulties again. Are we okay?
You're good.
Okay. No, I'm sorry to cut you off with that or whatever. I'm having horrible luck with my camera today. But once again, you can find some funeral homes where the staff and the owner really wants to work with you, but because of all of these funeral homes being grandfathered in and not having to make the accommodations, unless they change something, then they have to change everything. The building itself might not be accommodating at all, which sucks and is not right, but it's the truth of the matter too.
I feel like I had somebody who also was dyslexic and asked about, do I need to reading and doing, how much do I need to really be reading with the people and looking at numbers and doing things, like what could I do if I'm confusing things? I'm like, you're going to have to get in the situation and see what parts affect, are affected by, your disability, and then work around those and find answers to it. And maybe you have certain things set up a way for you so that it doesn't matter, or have somebody else doing the numbers with the family so it doesn't matter in the long run. So thank you, lovely ladies. Very informative. Here are my questions. Have you ever had an unusual request, for instance, a former circus performer that wanted to be viewed in his clown suit, or the disturbing trend where people request to be viewed in a totally usual manner, like a boxer upright with his trunks and boxing gloves? So extreme embalming is kind of what they're asking about. So I guess first part, have you ever had anybody who's had I call it the theme funeral, where the clown thing or whatever?
I've never had anything extreme, but I've definitely done, personalized services where the person's in their casket. For instance, I had one person who loved fly fishing. So we had all the fly fishing things around the casket, and he had his vest on that he used, but it's never anything extreme. It just seems to be things that people are passionate about in life, and their family wants to honor them in death by showcasing these hobbies or these passions.
Yeah.
So that's, nothing crazy.
Nothing awesome. Yeah, that's all I think is we did a 21 ball salute to a guy who was a golfer. So his buddies all lined up at the cemetery and hit 3 volleys of golf balls into the woods, which was really cool. Yeah, I can't think of anything that was wild, the circus performer thing. It does make me think, though, this is so off the wall. We did bury a guy who was a bouncer at a strip club. Very interesting attendees, we will say, of that one, because all the ladies came from the strip club. So it was quite interesting. But and then the extreme embalming, I have reached out. I've tried to talk to the funeral home in Puerto Rico that specializes in this. There's one in New Orleans as well that just had a viewing for a guy, was it 2 weeks ago, that hit the news again. And it's hard to connect to these people because so many people are trying to get information. And I know in a lot of our professional groups, on Facebook and things, it's always a big discussion, would you do this? There's so much liability for those type of situations, because I I don't know what you need to do to the body to get them to like be posed in those positions. Like, and I'm not saying this is happening, but are bones being broken to get them into certain positionings? What kind of rods and wires and all sorts of things are being used to keep a person in that position? Are they just being wrapped in plastics to keep from leaking? I don't know. There's so many questions I have about it, and there's no information to find at this point. And have your husbands seen an embalming?
My husband's right here. You haven't seen one, right? He's over in the no, Josiah has never seen an embalming. He's helped out at the funeral home. He's worked services. He's worked funerals, but he's never seen that. Really, when it comes to embalming and it comes to the prep room, you know, as a funeral director or mortician or embalmer, that's a sacred space. You know, what goes on in an embalming room is you're caring for somebody, but you still have dignity and respect for that body. So you don't let people in that room who aren't supposed to be in that room. Yeah. You know, unless you're like a student or an apprentice or somebody within the funeral industry, it's not like you're just going to be opening the door and be like, okay, honey, I'll be done in 5 minutes. Can you just come in here? You know, like you still try to like have that level of respect for the deceased. Even for somebody like my husband has seen so many dead bodies just because it's what I do. And he comes to the funeral home, you know, but when he comes to the funeral home, he's seeing the dead bodies in the visitation rooms, and not in like a prep room setting, just because it's someplace he doesn't need to be, you know. And that's not meant to sound like mean or anything like that, but it's just, you know, he's not a funeral director, and even though he has worked in a funeral home, it's just not something that he needs to see. Yeah.
Does he want to?
Do you want to?
I mean, I wouldn't be scared to. I don't have an interest either.
When he says, what did you say again?
I wouldn't be scared to, but I don't have an interest.
Okay, he wouldn't be afraid to, but he has no interest in seeing it.
Okay. That's my husband has. I think it kind of like baby stepped in, like it was like he's helping me, you know, move people around or help me put somebody in cremation box, and then he's helping me dress somebody, and he's helping me because he's helping around the funeral home. And then he was like there while I'm finishing embalming one day, and then I was like, you need to just see what I'm doing. I think rather than being curious and not know for sure, just watch and see what's going on so you know. And I think he's been around 2 or 3, I don't even know. You know, when the funeral home, like if I'm in a funeral home where I'm working, when I'm doing my freelance and it's within the residence, you know, he'll just wander and be like, hey, how you doing? It's totally exactly what you said, you know, like he would be like, hi, how's it going? You know, like, especially if it was late at night and stuff, he would be like, I'll come talk to you. You're tired. I'll just keep you, you know, help you stay awake or whatever. And which was nice. And, you know, part-time guys do that too. If they'll like hang out after they've gone on the removal and brought the person back with you to the funeral home. And one guy always stayed and helped me embalmed. Like that's just what he had done for 40 years and could probably embalm by himself if it was legal, because he had done so many embalmings. Didn't wear gloves, mind you, ever. Also,
that bothers me so much. Like the old school embalmers who are like, I mean,
so gross.
The gentleman who like took me under his wing, and was like one of the ones who really taught me how to embalm, would tell me stories about the gentleman who taught him how to embalm. And he's like, he'd be smoking in the prep room and eating a sandwich, and he'd go and like put his finger in and get like the jugular out without gloves. And I'm just like, oh my, and these guys like lived forever too, you know. It's like,
how does this happen? You're smoking, you're playing with, ugh.
Bodily fluids, you don't know how this person died, and like it is what it is. And but to get back, I feel like that may be where you and I differ on this. It's like me and my husband. Woo! But like me and my husband have never had we've never like lived in a funeral home setting, where with you doing more of like the like, what's the word I'm thinking? Carrie, help me out with the word I'm thinking.
Like the filling.
Yes, thank you. Yes. So like I'm certain like if I was ever in a position where like I was maybe living in the place, like he might like knock on the door and be like, honey, dinner's ready. You know, but because I have never been in that sort of a setting, he's never been around it, because anytime he's helping me out at the funeral home, he's helping me out with just different things. And I think like that may be
casual when it's, which might not be the right word, but when it's in the same building, like you said, you come down and are like, hey, dinner's ready, or hey, I'm going to go somewhere, and then they stand and they talk to you for 10 minutes while you're working, because it is just another room in your home that's happening in. And so you do wander in and out a little more frequently. Probably. Our last question. So Hollis has asked, hi, Kari and Lil Miss Funeral. Beside I am attending school at Stratford Career Institute for Funeral Services Administrator, which I didn't even know was a thing that you could study.
Yeah, I didn't know that was
like, I have experience preparing dead bodies and even done it on my own, like the last one in Missouri, because no one in the Jewish community has the experience on preparation. So I did it and trained another lady just to recite the prayers. But this type of job I have done along others. But what I need more than this Career Institute offer for me to run a funeral home and perform as a mortician. And Hollis has posted a lot of in the last week or two on some of my videos about what she does within, and I'm going to use all the wrong words, I think within her synagogue, is how you would say that when somebody dies, there's a team of women that go in and care for the body, or the men's team of men, and she seems to have fallen into this role that they kind of go to her and rely on her. So she's become sort of the expert within her branch of Judaism. And so she's, asking a lot of questions about this, because she's kind of doing the funeral director role, it sounds like, for the people that she's caring for. And so she's wondering, does she need a license? What does she need?
Do we know what state she's in?
Missouri.
Missouri, okay. I don't know why I asked that, because it's not like I know Missouri, like, laws and things like that.
Let me Google that.
Because the only state that I know where you do not need to have a license to practice as a funeral director is Colorado. Colorado, anybody can be a funeral director. They have like no licensing, like you have to go to mortuary school or different things over there.
Right.
And I know, like, so every other state, it just varies state by state. So if she's looking to be a funeral director, and this is where like the separate licenses come into play, because most states you can be licensed as a funeral director, you can be licensed as an embalmer. And if you're choosing to be licensed as a funeral director, the stipulations are not like more lax, but like a lot of states, you don't have to go to mortuary school.
Right.
If you have a bachelor's degree in anything, you can, be a funeral director if you take, your state tests and different things like that. But you don't have to go to actual mortuary school and learn how to embalm and learn the restorative arts and different things like that.
So I think Missouri is it's a dual license. So you're licensed as funeral director and embalmer. We're guessing on this, but most states are that way. I only know of, I think, 3 that are not, that pop in my mind, but I would have to look for sure.
There's a really good website that I always refer people to. and I don't know it off the top of my head. It's like the National Funeral Director Association. There's like an education, I think it's National Funeral Director Association. There's like an educational tab, and it tells you state by state
what
the requirements are for everything. So.
Okay. Well, and she's asking too if she could run a funeral home and perform as a mortician. So to own a funeral, anybody can own a funeral home. You don't need to be a funeral director at all. It's just owning a business. But you do have to hang a license on the wall, which means you have to have a manager who is a licensed funeral director hanging that license on the wall. So if she doesn't want to be licensed, she could have a licensed funeral director that is also employed there running it, or overseeing things, and then she can do, you know, these other parts that maybe don't have to have a license to do them.
So yeah, because she's going to need a funeral director if she's not going to be it, because you'll need somebody to sign the contracts. You'll need somebody to do the death certificates.
Right.
You need somebody to do the transfers.
Right.
You know, because like, for instance, if I go to a hospital to do a transfer, I have to sign and write down my license number to prove that I am a licensed funeral director, and show your ID card, because you have a pocket card too. So right. You have to.
That's crazy. See, we don't have to do that.
Really?
We don't have licensed people go on removals, transfers, whatever you, yeah. And we don't have to be licensed to do contracts. So we have.
When I say transfers too, I mean like anybody can transfer a body, but doing the initial pickup of the body.
No, that's what I mean. You
oh, really?
No, it doesn't.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like if I need somebody to like move a body between like the two funeral homes, like once it's in our care, like
right.
I can have anybody do that. But for the initial pickup,
anybody can go to like the hospital or anything. So like, do you have removal services there?
Mm-hmm.
So then do they have licensed people on their removal services?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so basically, like, I have a couple of friends who are fully licensed funeral directors, but they just own their own removal services where, you know, if I don't want to get up in the middle of the night and go out and do some sort of, I know transfer and removal, I like use like interchangeably, but
yeah.
They basically go out and do that for you. I've gone to a hospital where people did not believe I was a funeral director, and they make me show them my pocket card before they will release a body to me. Like that has real. And the one time I did it, I was so like, this one time in my mind, I was so unbelievably mad because I was going to do one of the removals, and I had switched my purses. So my pocket card was in my other purse. I didn't realize. So I had to drive all the way home, pick it up, and then go back to the hospital. I like threw it on the security desk because I was so mad. And I was like, I had one of those moments, like if I was a guy, you would have never asked for my pocket card.
Thank you. All right, well, that's our round up of our 10 questions with Little Miss Funeral and myself, Kari. So we need more questions from you guys you want answered. So make sure to post any questions below. As you can see, they're all over the board what we're answering. So whether it's about us in the profession, whether it's about bodies, whether it's about funeral directing, embalming, whatever, go ahead and post them below. We'll make sure to answer them in our next video. And we'll see you guys soon. Bye.
Bye.